Donald Trump's administration wants to silence anyone who says anything bad about Trump on TV because all Trump does is watch TV. Okay?
A few moments later.
We did receive information suggesting that the federal government did not shut down this segment, number one.
So let's check in on Stephen Colbert, aka the professional victim, because let's not forget, this is the guy who's been furiously claiming since last year that it was Donald Trump and political censorship that got his show canceled, despite the fact it was verifiably true his ratings and viewership were absolutely in the dumps. After all, here you had a guy running a comedy show that wasn't funny and pushing political propaganda that wasn't popular. How did you expect the market to respond? But surely it must be Trump's fault. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's become a common pattern for Democrats to use Trump as a shield to excuse themselves from their own personal and professional failures. Look, for instance, to Tim Walz and Jacob Frey, who are now claiming that it is thanks to Donald Trump and ICE raids that their state is in a crippling economic and financial crisis, as if that wasn't already happening before because they allowed Somali criminals to steal billions of dollars from their economy. But hey, surely everything must be Trump's fault. I was riding my bicycle today, I fell off of it. That's because of Donald Trump. You know, that's how Trump derangement syndrome clearly does work. But it appears that is once again the case here today, as Stephen Colbert recently went on The Late Show to claim that CBS had essentially censored him due to scrutiny by the Trump FCC, except hours later, in a pretty rare repudiation of one of their own employees, the CBS network came out with a public statement saying, actually, that is not the case whatsoever. We never did this. We never censored Stephen Colbert. What happened is that his recent interview with Texas Democrat Senate candidate James Talarico had violated FCC rules. We gave him a chance to rectify that. We offered, hey, you can give equal airtime to the other Democrats like Jasmine Crockett. It's not a big deal. Here's what you can do. And instead of choosing to follow the rules that are set not by CBS, but by federal law that long predates Trump, Colbert instead decided not to air the interview, claim he was censored because he didn't want to comply or follow those rules, and then go out there and make this whole big public stand with his network, hoping to garner sympathy and invent a new liberal hoax. Except, I would repeat here, none of it is actually true. And it's also even further causing some backlash from Talarico's own opponent in the race. You may know this woman by the name of Jasmine Crockett, who is likewise accusing Stephen Colbert of lying. So yeah, this whole little stunt is backfiring on a number of levels. We'll explain it all to you here, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, this all started recently when Stephen Colbert decided to bring James Talarico onto his show for an interview. Now, for those of you who are not completely familiar with Talarico, you may remember this is the guy who, in the Texas state legislature, led the whole fleeing to Illinois to deny a quorum thing in the redistricting battle just last year. He is this Walmart Pete Buttigieg character that's being lauded by the Democrat establishment as the future. This is the rising star. I don't know exactly what the Democrat leadership's obsession is with these like metrosexual white guys who are completely bland and uninspiring, but somehow they think that's going to win over rural America or some garbage. I don't really know, but this is what they're doing, right? And Colbert, clearly being a pawn of what many would call the Democrat establishment, recently brought Talarico on and tried to run a propaganda piece for his Senate campaign.
Do you mean to cause trouble?
I think that Donald Trump is worried that we're about to flip Texas.
Now, the big issue there is, and we brought this up before, by the way, Stephen Colbert, despite claims that he has total free speech on the airwaves, actually doesn't, for the very precise reason that he's operating on a public broadcasting license. As we brought this up before, right? But the legacy networks like CBS, ABC, NBC, the ones that you can historically access without a subscription to cable, actually do have a special license with the federal government that allows them to operate without having to pay for the same private broadcasting license that, say, the History Channel or CNN or Fox News do. But part of that agreement says that they have to serve the public interest, which likewise means in the context of, say, interviewing political candidates, you can't just run a propaganda piece for one candidate. You have to give equal time to all of at least the notable notable figures in the field, which is to say, according to my understanding of the FCC rules, if Colbert wants to interview Talarico while Talarico is an active political candidate, he would also have to offer the same time to, say, Jasmine Crockett, because, again, it's sort of a public forum, right? It's public broadcasting. Those are just the rules. We did not invent them. Now, depending on how you interpret or enforce them, you could argue that Stephen Colbert's entire show, being a very clear liberal propaganda show, entirely is in violation and should not be on CBS to begin with. But hey, perhaps that is being fixed already. That said, because of all of this, CBS basically said, look, if you want to interview Talarico, for the sake of fairness, you have to also interview Crockett, right? That's also important to keep in mind. We weren't even saying, oh, you should go interview a Republican, bring Donald Trump on the show. No, just interview the other Democrats so that we're following the election and broadcasting rules here. Well, how did Stephen Colbert respond? By having a childish meltdown and straight up gaslighting about it.
Stephen Colbert's beef with his own network is escalating once again after the late night host said CBS blocked him from airing an interview with a Texas Democrat. Correspondent Nate Foy has been following the story. He joins us now. Hi, Nate.
Hey, John. Yeah, he's not holding any punches ahead of the cancellation of his show. During his monologue last night, Stephen Colbert said CBS lawyers prevented him from airing an interview with Texas State Representative James Talarico, and he claims they did that because of pressure from the Trump administration. So this has to do with the FCC's equal time rule. It requires networks provide fair coverage to competing political candidates. It hasn't traditionally been enforced for news content and talk shows, but in a letter in January, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr hinted that he's considering changing that. Carr said it will depend on whether or not talk shows have a political motivation in booking a specific guest, and Colbert responded to him specifically last night. Watch.
Sir, you're chairman of the FCC, so FCCU. Because I think you are motivated by partisan purposes yourself.
So Colbert went on to say that Carr wants to silence anybody who criticizes President Donald Trump on television, but Colbert's history shows a clear political preference, according to the media watchdog Newsbusters. Take a look at this, John. Since 2022, they found that Colbert has hosted 176 left-leaning guests and only one Republican. That was Liz Cheney, who, of course, eventually became a prominent critic of President Trump.
So what I find hilarious is, first of all, the fact that Stephen Colbert doesn't actually deny that they were violating FCC rules, right? And you notice this in Meet the Press and some shows like that. The Sunday News, for example, it's very common. They bring on a Republican and then a Democrat and then a Republican. You rotate the guests because, yes, there are certain mandates of political balance. All Stephen Colbert is basically arguing is that he's going to sit there and cry because the rules exist. After all, nobody's above the law, right? What do you want from us? But secondly, you have to appreciate the true conspiracy theory by Stephen Colbert that there is this secret agenda by Donald Trump to truly censor James Talarico. Yes, of all people, this completely mediocre Walmart Pete Buttigieg running in a Texas Senate primary for a general election. He'll probably lose anyway. This is who Trump really fears. And in order to do so, he's seeking to censor him so that what? So that Jasmine Crockett can go on to win the Democrat primary, right? I don't understand. Oh, yeah, Trump is colluding with Jasmine Crockett to take down Talarico. I don't exactly know if that's the case, okay? I guess you could make the argument that secretly Republicans do kind of want Crockett to win the primary because we believe she'll be an easy path for the general election to beat, right? And she's just such a clown. She'll be a great mouthpiece for the Democrat Party in 2026. I mean, you could make that argument, but it's a little bit far-stretched, frankly, to argue that the Trump administration explicitly cares about who wins this Texas Senate Democrat primary. No, I would rather have to make the argument, perhaps you were just breaking the rules. You got a little legal check there. And instead of doing something about it, I mean, very easily, you're one of the top liberal hosts in America, although that audience is not all that big. You could have just interviewed Jasmine Crockett. I don't see the problem, Stephen Colbert. Actually, the fact that you were so explicitly refusing to do so does actually seem to suggest to me your true intention, yes, of political interference, right? You were trying to engineer and maneuver the way you wanted this election to go. That's why you wouldn't interview Crockett, because, hey, you're a liberal, right? Two liberals running against each other. Shouldn't you be relatively neutral? on public airwaves, right? We repeat, you have your private free speech to say what you want, endorse who you want. But when you're on the network, that is not the case, right? That's exactly why they proceeded to go post this entire interview on YouTube, but couldn't air it on TV. Yeah, that's how it works. Okay, those are the rules. But that said, we now have the response, and CBS, the network here, is telling a little bit of a different side of the story. So take a listen. CBS just threw Stephen Colbert under the bus and says he lied when he said the network had spiked his interview with James Talarico. The full quote here saying, "The Late Show was not prohibited by CBS from broadcasting the interview with James Talarico. The show was provided legal guidance that the broadcast could trigger the FCC equal time rule for 2 other candidates, including Jasmine Crockett, and presented options for how equal time for other candidates could be fulfilled," right? So they told Colbert, hey, you can just go interview Jasmine Crockett and everything's fine. For whatever reason, I don't know. Stephen, do you secretly think that this ghetto idiot is actually a bad look for your party or something? Are you some kind of racist? You know? Are you trying to stop the strong, independent black woman from winning the election? I'm not exactly sure. What does Stephen Colbert actually have against interviewing Jasmine Crockett? Is she not also a rising star of the Democrat Party? Is it because she's black? Is that why you don't want to interview, because she's black, right? The Late Show decided to present the interview through its YouTube channel with on-air promotion on the broadcast rather than potentially providing the equal time option. So in other words, Stephen Colbert refused to comply, refused to follow the rules. Everything went as it did, and of course, he's sitting there and crying about it. Now, that said, as it pertains to the Democrat challenger, in this case, Jasmine Crockett, let's check in on her because it seems she has something to say about this as well. Take a listen.
I've always been someone who has been intellectual. I was top 10% of my class at Texas Southern, my first year in law school. So, you know.
You're always clapping back.
Oh, sorry. Looks like we played the wrong clip. But just remember, Jasmine Crockett, according to her, is an intellectual. You know, she's a very smart person. She's well educated. Yeah, sure. Which completely makes me have to ask the question of Stephen Colbert, why are you denying equal time? You racist. You're equal time to this strong, independent, intellectual black woman who, by the way, is leading currently in the race for the Texas primary. Well, that said, Crockett is completely turning the knife here, metaphorically, actually calling out that the federal government had nothing to do with shutting the interview down and that Colbert could have had her on to resolve the issue, but didn't want her to.
We did receive information suggesting that the federal government did not shut down this segment, number one. That is my understanding, that the federal government didn't shut this down, and we will do an official statement once we get another official statement that we anticipate is going to be coming from Paramount. All right, so we will read what they say, and then we'll go from there. It is our understanding that Colbert, either Mr. Colbert or CBS, decided to make this hit on the air, and this was because of a fear that the FCC may say something to them, and that there may have been advice to just have me on, and then they could clear the issue. It was my understanding that someone somewhere decided we just don't want to do that, and instead we're going to just do it this way.
Yeah, well, as you can tell, now is when it starts to get good. Because not only did we just catch Stephen Colbert and James Talarico essentially engaging in a hoax, right? Completely gaslighting and selectively lying about the whole reason that interview was not allowed to air. But on top of it, now James Talarico's challenger, Jasmine Crockett, is pouncing on the situation. She is actually defending the federal government. Yes, defending the Trump administration in this case to not just dog on Stephen Colbert, but ultimately on James Talarico as well. And as a matter of fact, she is now essentially the one arguing censorship because the Stephen Colbert team appears to have made a deliberate decision not to put her on the show for the reason I can only speculate that Colbert is trying to launch a soft endorsement of Talarico, which probably further, given his own political leanings, does confirm that he's trying to engineer and manipulate the election here in this case. You know, it's not all entirely just for the sake of just interviewing a guy I wanted to interview. And it has not stopped there. I'd like to point out that this entire James Talarico versus Jasmine Crockett primary has been a complete mess. We also have Crockett, as you could likely expect, trying to insinuate that Talarico, the white guy in this race, is of course a racist, and I'm sure those accusations will be coming for Stephen Colbert very soon as well, because after all, again, I repeat, why didn't you want to have this strong, intelligent, black intellectual on your show, Stephen Colbert?
So I think it is what so many black people fear, is that, you know, even the most quote unquote well-intentioned white folk sometimes behind closed doors may say things about us, and it makes us question. And it doesn't matter your political affiliation. And I think that it is a real fear that a lot of not just black people, but minorities have about how they may get talked about behind closed doors. And so the question, I think, for a lot of voters will be, you know, is this someone who can represent me when, if behind closed doors with a black woman, you felt comfortable enough to say this, what exactly is happening behind closed doors with non-people of color? And I think that that's a real question.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what's happening behind closed doors. Them white folk trying to keep a sister down, ain't they? Because I guess you could say you just watched Colbert and Talarico engage in a reverse Jussie Smollett, right? They invented this whole hoax about how they were targeted for their politics, and in reality it was one big excuse to target Jasmine Crockett for her politics. And, you know, surely, by the way, Jasmine Crockett, yeah, you must be so right. Definitely the reason why Colbert is quietly trying to endorse Talarico and wanted him on the show instead of you certainly could not be because of the fact that a lot of people in the party see you as an unserious person, a complete electoral liability, this just loud, ratchet, improper speaking English individual who just is very likely to get destroyed in the election, and by the way, just be a bad look for the Democrats overall. No, it's not just because you're a complete embarrassment. Surely it must be over race, right? Even them white liberals are secretly racist behind the scenes. They're just trying to keep you down, and that's the only reason. And the KKK running the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, ladies and gentlemen, tisk. I mean, look at this. Look at this censorship. Look at this lack of representation. So essentially, there you have it, guys. This sums up the entire Texas Democrat primary. On one hand, one campaign is just inventing fake hoaxes, claiming things happened that didn't happen to make themselves look better. On the other hand, you have the other campaign calling that campaign racist for those very hoaxes. What a complete mess. I mean, Texas, I think it's safe to say if you get either of them as your senator, you're completely screwed. The good news, that's very unlikely to happen. But of course, make sure you go vote in November because, I don't think we want white-faced Jussie Smollett or Jasmine Crockett, who needs no abbreviation or nickname, to be in charge of the show here, guys. But there you have it. That said, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.